Hey guys, so my name's Kyle, and I went to Tokyo, Japan over the summer. I was at Technos College to be, and I acted as an English language teaching assistant for just a little under 2 months. And I was greeted really well and treated really well. The Japanese are all about greetings and farewells, and my face was, that's a pretty big screen when you're actually there. So like my ego is really soared, and I really like the attention, just like I'm liking the attention right now. And and so I went to, I basically stalked my boss for all his classes, and because English is so, a lot of these people all of the students are studying English because we live in a globalized society. I really had to participate in the class with all their exercises, because that's how you learn a different language, is you exercise, participate in group work and discussions. And I also had some, I was sort of the person to go to for rehearsals. A lot of these classes had public speaking components. You had to memorize a poem by Robert Frost, and which is difficult when you don't really know English that well. And when you know English and you don't want to memorize it. And then I think the biggest part of the internship is that I had to be speaking with students in informal settings, so then they're sort of used to it. And then for that, you sort of have to have, I really had to exercise some personality and really put in some effort. Because you wanted to have a personality that invites people to talk to you, and which is also good for making great friends. But I think I'm like an introvert, but I think I really changed. Okay. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention how I traveled. This is me almost at the top of Mount Fuji, and I have a black toenail as proof of it. And I made a lot of great friends, and then these are all students who will, who are cooler than I can ever hope to be, and I hope they get, a great job and a great life. I had an internship in Akita International University, where a lot of students spoke fluent English because they were from all over the world. And here's a picture that I provided for the famous library with the umbrella design. I mostly worked at the Research Community Outreach Service, where I organized a lot of events for the university. And the events varied. Rice planting events were planned, traditional festivals, elementary school visits, and more. I also gave tours to a lot of guests, including Japanese students and who were interested in the university, and I held English conversation sessions with Japanese students who are practicing English as well. It was an amazing culture. The opportunity to meet and have lunch with a professional sumo wrestler, which I provided a picture, and I experienced the local tradition of namahage, where demons break into homes wearing skippy masks and must be warded off with offerings of food and sake. Okay. These are some beautiful sites that I was able to take a picture of. And then I just wanted to say thank you so much to Akita and the Freeman Foundation for the opportunity. And now I'm in Copenhagen.
Okay, so I'm Gina. This is Ada, Silali, and Emma, and we are the group who spent 6 weeks of our summer in Lingnan in Hong Kong.
Okay, so the way that our internship was kind of formatted was in 3 different parts, I guess. So we had a class that we went to twice a week for like 3.5 hours, and that was on campus, and we were in a classroom at Lingnan. We had 2 instructors, actually. We had one local professor from Hong Kong, and then a visiting professor who was actually from the University of Minnesota, so that was interesting. And then with the class, we had like an attached service learning project, and then extra internship hours, which Silali will talk.
Right. So we actually worked at other organizations, not just at our own projects. So one of the ones that we went to was Crossroads, and it was like a refugee camp style location, and all we did really was sew or like cut off tags off clothes or like pack books that would be sent to other countries. We also worked at an elderly camp, which is that picture right there. It was a lot of fun. We took pictures of the elderly and played games with them. And they were all very sweet and nice, even though Emma, myself, and Gina could not speak to them because we don't know Cantonese. Ada does. And we also did some extra hours at the Office of Service Learning, which was the office that was in charge of our internship. Basically.
So when we got there, we had to do service learning projects, and I was really lucky enough to be able to be in a group where I got to choose my own project I wanted to do. I really focused on children's health. So I was grouped with 2 local students from Hong Kong and another student from Mexico, which was really great because of the different perspectives we got. So we held a health awareness week at Hingda Elementary School, and then we worked with 5th graders primarily. And then leading up to that, we had observations, and we prepared, like each night we researched and talked about different topics for the day. We would go over like environment, safety, like sanitation habits, like diseases, and that was really great because the 5th graders really surprised us how smart they were, and I was blown away. So yeah, it was really great, and I think it was a nice change of pace for them because they never get to interact and like have anything more than just academics at their school. So I had a great time.
So I worked at the NGO Yao Oi Tom, sorry if I butchered that. And so basically, I went to a community center, and the goal was to get elderly community members to go and use the gym that we helped design. So to help combat the effects of dementia. So exercise is good for that. Fun fact. And they have a rising elderly population there, so that's why they really wanted to get that done. So my group basically made a design plan for the gym, helped set up the gym. And then we created an instructional video for this gym of how to use it, which I somehow was volunteered as the person to be in the video. I also didn't realize I would be blown up that big on the screen. It's probably good. I ate a lot of cheese bread while I was there, so it's good they forced me to work out. So in a nutshell, that's what my group was doing. So it's in Cantonese in the bottom, so we had it narrated by one of my group members who spoke Cantonese. And it was really cool because my group for that was very international. There was me from America, a local student from Hong Kong, and then students from Canada and Turkey as well.
Okay, so Silali and I were actually in separate groups, but they were kind of doing the same thing, so we kind of worked together a lot. So we also worked at Yaoi Tong, which was an elderly center, and the goal of our project was to increase participation in the elderly center with all of the elderly population who were living around it by kind of raising awareness for it and getting them involved and seeing why or like what would make them go to the center. So we did that in several different ways, which are covered, but that's the format. So.
I'll try my best to remember what we wrote. So part of service learning is doing research first. You find out what is needed, and then you proceed with your project right after that. So what we found is that the elderly in Hong Kong, one of the problems was that they lived alone. So we wanted to encourage them to visit the center because the center also expressed concern with low attendance. So we did home visits where we surveyed the elderly and we asked them like, oh, what do you want to see from the center? Like, what would help you? What would encourage you to visit the center more often? And a lot of them basically said like it's too hard to get there because a lot of them couldn't really walk very well because they're older now. And actually getting to the center was difficult even for us in like the Hong Kong humidity because there's a lot of stairs, like stair climbing involved. You can imagine how difficult it would be for them. And also they said that they didn't want to feel like a bother to anybody, and they really liked the home visits. We noticed that because they just like having someone to talk to. So what we did is we had an exhibition where we talked about our research, and then we encouraged a lot of the elderly that were walking by. It was an outdoor exhibition near the center, and we told them like, you should come visit, like you should come, like we're gonna have this event. And then at that event, not a lot of people went that wouldn't normally come, but it was still a great experience, and Emma and I were very proud with the work that we did with the center.
Hi everybody, so my name is Peter Barnes, and the six of us spent the summer at Erie at the International Rice Research Institute. And so Erie is, although it may not seem like it here, rice is really important to a large population of the world. It serves as a staple for about half of the global population, and it definitely was a staple in our diet when we were in the Philippines. So there's a lot of work that can be done with rice, with the farmers in labs to help tackle a lot of issues that a lot of people face, where rice is really intertwined in their life. On our orientation at Erie, we got to actually experience part of the planting process by preparing the land. And so we used machines, as you can see here, and Gretchen the water buffalo helped us out. So that was a good time. I was really excited to get in the mud, get dirty, and so we got to prepare the field by tilling it, and then also we got to transplant rice seedlings into a field. The department that I worked in was the C4 department, and this is part of a global effort to convert the photosynthetic process of rice from C3, which it currently is, into a C4 photosynthetic process. Corn, for example, or maize, uses the C4 photosynthetic process and is much more efficient than the C3 photosynthetic process that rice currently uses. And so I worked on a team with local Filipino researchers, and I analyzed genes and proteins in rice, different rice strains, in an effort to identify plants that are more evolved and closer to the C4 photosynthetic process.
So in case you were questioning the six, there's an extra person who's not here. So I'll be Kirsten. Kirsten worked in the entomology department underneath Dr. Buhan Hadi. She spent the first half of the time over there sorting insects, which was not always the fun part. And then she worked the second half on actually an independent project where she worked with the wasp Oligostita, and she checked to see if the presence of a flowering plant would increase their lifespan. And the reason we wanted to test that is because these little wasps actually feed on the pests in the rice field, so they would really help farmers.
So, I'm Vishnu, and I was in the genetics and biotechnology division at Erie, and I worked in the genetic transformation lab, and basically I was fortifying rice with iron, and some of the things I did were the polymerase chain reaction, gel electrophoresis, DNA cloning, DNA recovery, and agrobacterium mediated transformation. And basically all of these things are just part of the process of introducing the gene to the rice and testing to see if it's there or not, and how to make it better for farmers.
I'm Mansi. I also worked in the genetics and biotechnology division at Erie. But my supervisor, Yvonne, was actually in the middle of a project of incorporating zinc into the endosperm of the rice seed. So I kind of just went in and did all the lab work for her, like a lot of PCR, and then if the PCR works, then we do assays and cloning and a lot of DNA extraction and purification just to test if the inserts, the constructs that we put in, were actually working.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I worked in the plant pathology lab, and that was also part of the genetics and biotechnology division. My supervisor was Dr. Cassiana Veracruz. And while I was there, my internship was a little different than everybody else's. I didn't start and finish like my own project. I worked on a bunch of different things that were going on in the plant pathology lab. One of them was a joint project with the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. I worked with near-infrared spectroscopy to detect pathogens in the rice seeds. I also worked with rice microbiome and bacterial blight resistance. Another project I did was with the Heirloom Rice Project, which was a joint effort with the Philippine Rice Research Institute and the Department of Agriculture. That was really interesting because I got to interact with local farmers in the northern part of the Philippines.
Okay, it's me again.
So I worked in the plant breeding department underneath Dr. Jahar Ali, and I was given 14,400 seeds and was told to go plant them in a greenhouse. And so I was testing about 180 different rice varieties for their weed competitive ability to see if they would outcompete weeds for nutrients and water just in the normal fields. It was a lot of work. It's very hot there, and I had to collect data in a greenhouse every 7 days. And you can see my wonderful team of Filipino friends, and we all huddled around measuring how high the plants were. But yeah, it was a lot. We had quite a good time at Erie. We really enjoyed our time over there.
My name is Molly Johnson. This is Zoe. And we were in Seoul, South Korea for 8 weeks this summer. Okay, so like I said, we were in Seoul, South Korea this summer at Yonsei University, specifically at the Institute of East and West Studies. So unlike a lot of the other programs that were more outside oriented, ours was definitely more inside oriented. We didn't have to actually leave the building to go from our living quarters to work quarters. But we had plenty of time to go outdoors and stuff later. So, Yonsei and IEWS, just some stuff so you know what this university is. It's a really, really prestigious university in Korea. They have what's known as the SKY Universities. It's an acronym. So that's Seoul National University, Korea University, and then Yonsei University. And they are the three most prestigious universities in South Korea. So for us to get a chance to work there was incredible. At the top floor of New Millennium Hall, which is this huge building on campus. And so we worked in what was kind of the office that did everything for IEWS. So kind of helped them with anything they needed. Some of our bigger projects, we designed and created a pamphlet for IEWS, which was great because we got to learn so much about the Institute because we had to write up everything. You know, what does it do? What are its publications? That sort of thing. And you can see the picture of kind of our design plan, and we had to do it all on the computer. And then our other bigger project was helping them translate, but we don't speak Korean, which was a problem in many ways. But specifically with this, they had to send it to a third party who would translate it to rough English, and then we would polish it up, get it ready for publishing. And the Networker is their newsletter that they send out. So again, we got to learn about IEWS's, all of their events and what was going on.
All right. Okay, good afternoon. So David, Brianna, Susan, and I were able to intern at the Food and Nutrition Research Institute this summer.
So for the FNRI, the mission statement was the provision of accurate data, correct information, and innovative technologies to fight malnutrition. So through their national and updating surveys, their main goal is to collect the data through interviews and measurements in order to determine the state of the country's nutrition levels.
So most of our time in the Philippines was spent collecting data, and we were out in the field. So there are three types of field teams. The team we spent the most time with were the local government unit teams, also known as the LGU teams. So these teams are composed of nurses and dietitians, and there are about 10 teams with 10 members each. And so you're assigned, so each team is assigned a barangay, which is the equivalent of a neighborhood. And then you go into that neighborhood and you have a certain number of households you go to. And then you conduct surveys and take anthropometric and clinical measurements. And the surveys include food frequency questionnaires, 24-hour food recalls, and since it's a government agency, you also ask the respondents if they're aware of certain government policies.
So the other one was the food establishment teams, which was mainly comprised of they would go to the most popular restaurant or food establishment that in the barangays, and what they would do is before the customers would come in, they would take a sample of every single meal that they can serve the people, and they measure how much they weigh, and then the survey team pretends to be the waitresses and waiters, and then they collect the leftovers afterwards and measure how much the people have wasted. In terms of takeout food, they always assume that every food is consumed completely.
Alright, so then the goal of the food store team is to basically evaluate what kind of foods are available to the community. So what they did was they would map out all the different food stores, or also known as sari-saris in the Philippines. And we would basically, then after mapping them out, we would locate them and then take an inventory of all of the food products that they would have. So we would note the price, the net weight, the brand, and make a list of that.
Hello everybody. We're the group that interned at Gawad Kalinga Enchanted Farm. My name is Suchana. This is Morgan, Jesse, me, Brendan, and Chris. So the vision of GK is to end poverty for 5 million families by the end of 2024. And the way that they do this is by building GK communities all over the Philippines and employing people who are in poverty so that they can be self-sustaining. We were located at the GK headquarters, which is in Angat, Bulacan, a few hours away from Manila. And it consists of 42 acres of land.
As well as it was beginning of the wet season, so things needed to be planted. It is a farm. So we spent a lot of our off time in between projects helping with other projects, as well as things like planting and cleaning beds off of weeds. Towards the end of the summer, actually, it became the rice season in the area we're at. And so we had to prepare rice terraces and actually go out and pick up mud by hand and build terraces around.
And then one of the other projects that Nate and I spent a lot of time with was working with the preschool at GK. So it took a few weeks to get involved with this, but we ended up teaching or helping teach a class. That was our class up there. And so we do different activities with them. So a lot of it was singing and dancing, which was actually really fun. And so it was a way for them to like practice their English and stay active, and then we'd help them with individual projects. Then we also got to get involved in the Nutrition Month event. So every month there's a different theme for the schools, and so they had a parade and some competitions that Nate and I got to be the judges for.
So we wanted to try and raise awareness about financial management, saving your money, and different things like that. One of the biggest parts of our experience, I'd say, at Gawad Kalinga was just getting to know the people in the community. We had many various activities, like in the middle there is a boodle fight, which is a traditional Filipino style of eating, where we all just sit around and try and grab as much food as possible with our hands. So that was an interesting experience.
Yeah, one of the projects that me, Morgan, and Suchana worked on was a drip irrigation system. We were there during the rainy season, so it rained pretty much every day. But during the dry season, it would go weeks at a time without there being rain. So it's pretty important to have a system in place that would be more water efficient than was currently there. There was like a model of a drip irrigation system on the farm already, but it was pretty expensive to replicate, so you couldn't really expect other farmers to be able to base anything off that model. So we did some research. We found a way to build it using different lengths of tube that were pretty cheap. We didn't wind up building like a huge system, but we did have a model set up that could be replicated for not too much of this.
So I was working with one of the social enterprises on the farm, which is a chicken farm. And so throughout most of my time, I was helping one of the other interns run some of her experiments on feeding the chickens fermented organic products to increase their body weight to see if they'll get fatter. So most of it was me building the pen so that we could separate the chickens from each other so we know which ones were feeding what and everything.
So I'm Eric, and this is Liz, and we did our internship at Human Nature in Quezon City in the Philippines. Quezon City is part of Metro Manila, and it's also the largest city in the Philippines.
So a little bit of background on Human Nature. That guy, British guy named Dylan, and he was one of the richest guys in Britain, and taking his helicopter to work every day. And then he's like, why am I doing this? I could do so much more with this money. So he went to GK actually, and he fell in love with the boss's daughter and basically never left. And he created a social enterprise called Human Nature, which is a cosmetics company, personal products and stuff that is all natural.
With our presentation and the previous presentation, it's really important to understand what a social enterprise is. And Human Nature is, part of Human Nature's mission is to be the gold standard of a social enterprise. Social enterprises are for-profit entities that have a specific social mission at the center of their operation. So for Human Nature, it's threefold. They're pro-Philippines, pro-poor, and pro-environment. Human Nature's entire operation of Human Nature is about uplifting poverty and purposing poor farmers in the Philippines to make their lives better. Which leads me to my particular internship, which was in the social enterprise development. So I dealt with this question of what is a social enterprise a lot. It's a very dynamic and fluid issue, and creating a standardized definition is a really difficult thing to do, and that was one of my main tasks this summer. So I'll let you know when I figure out a definition that works for everybody. So I was working on 3 main projects, and 2 of them are really closely related. Super Goods is one project that Human Nature has launched in Rustan's, which is a top supermarket in the Philippines. And Super Goods it's very similar to Target's Made to Matter campaign, if anyone's familiar with that. It's a one-stop shop for social enterprise products in the Philippines. So you can go into Rustan's, find an entire aisle dedicated to just social enterprise products. And then part of that was developing the Social Enterprise Guild. So a lot of the other social enterprises that Human Nature works very closely with, we wanted to collaborate and share resources, share ideas, and come up with a strategy to attack super goods and how to expand the social enterprise landscape in the Philippines to be more of a household thing. And finally, my last project was the Consumer Value Survey, which was a really important project to me because I did the whole thing by myself. I felt like I was really a part of the team and not just the intern grabbing coffee. I created the survey myself. I wrote all the questions. I worked with the consumer research team to get participants from our database. We sent the survey out. Got 104 respondents in like 2 weeks, which was really impressive because, you know, huge population makes things really easy for that sort of thing. And analyzed the data, compiled the results, and they're using it to better market super goods moving forward.
And okay. So I was on the international business team, and that's my cute little team. They're so little. And that's not it. So Human Nature is trying to expand their market into other countries. So they're already in places like Singapore, the United Arab Emirates, and in the US a little bit. But there isn't an actual chain here in the US, and I don't know anything about Singapore or the UAE, so I did stuff about America. And so my experiences there was basically to give insight into the US market, you know, cultural differences and why we buy things here in America versus how they market things in the Philippines, and how to sort of bridge that gap between the two. And then I did a lot of social media stuff, so people ask me what I did this summer, I'm like, oh, I just hung out on social media, it's fine, and they're like, okay. But I did a lot of marketing stuff, you know, looking up what sort of trends there are on Instagram and ways to market things when there aren't Human Nature representatives in the US very much, so we wanted to get ourselves, have more of a presence online, and we can do that through social media. And
another large part of our internship was having a lot of fun.